Let's go straight to our Ukraine correspondent, Gulliver Cragg, who's waiting for us. Gulliver, good evening to you. That line from Trump, end the war or face destruction. I wonder how that's playing where you are.
Well, I mean, the feeling in Ukraine is that the meeting on Friday was not what Ukraine wanted. I wouldn't say that Ukraine desperately needs these Tomahawk missiles. They would be an asset to its deep strike campaign inside Russia, but probably not a game changer. More worrying is the change in Donald Trump's rhetoric and the fact that he seems once again to be, rather than saying Ukraine can take back all its territories by force, thinking that the Russians have got a good chance of taking more territory in Donbass, and that perhaps Ukraine would be better off handing over those territories as part of a deal, which seems to be what Vladimir Putin was trying to persuade them of in that recent phone call. There have been conflicting reports about how the meeting on Friday exactly went between Volodymyr Zelensky and Donald Trump. What was it? The Financial Times was saying that it was a shouting match with obscenities and stuff. Today, Politico is reporting, also citing unnamed sources familiar with how the meeting went, saying that there weren't obscenities, there wasn't shouting. Donald Trump got a little bit irritated when Volodymyr Zelensky was showing him maps, and at some point was like, stop showing me all these maps. I think we can conclude that Donald Trump is not a fan of humanities subjects, because in Alaska, it was when Vladimir Putin tried to give him a history lesson talking about Kyiv and Rus that he became extremely exasperated and said, stop telling me all about this medieval history and everything. Clearly, the American president is not a fan of academic knowledge of any kind. Steve Witkoff, his envoy, was again flouting his ignorance at the meeting, talking about how, seeing as the Donbass region is Russian-speaking, perhaps that's the reason why it should in fact be handed over to Russia, simply ignoring the fact that there are plenty of other Russian-speaking regions in Ukraine and people whose native language is Russian who are absolutely patriotically pro-Ukrainian. Volodymyr Zelensky, first and foremost, among them again. So the evolution of the Americans' attitude is a bit worrying for Ukrainians, but they have become well aware that the US president is constantly changing his mind, and he doesn't seem to have pivoted right back to almost supporting Putin and blaming Volodymyr Zelensky for the war as he was some months ago. So they feel like there's still some hope, and there doesn't seem to be much hope of the meeting in Budapest yielding anything very good, really, seeing as the Russian side have already said that they don't want to go along with Donald Trump's idea of freezing the conflict on its current lines and then negotiating later, which I think was like the basic thing that he wanted to try to get after that was, that was what he said when he came out of that meeting with Volodymyr Zelensky on Friday anyway.
Indeed, Gulliver. Trump, as you say, not pivoting straight back to where he was before. At least he said, I think that he thinks that Ukraine would not win the war, but he says anything could happen. So I suppose there's something in that. Quick update, Gulliver, on the situation on the ground. We know that Ukraine has hit Russia, but of course Russia's hit Ukraine.
Well, the Russians are really trying to take control of the rest of the Donbass region. So that part of Donetsk Oblast that they don't yet control. There's two big towns there, Slovyansk and Kramatorsk, that the Russians are a very long way away from. There are three other quite major towns, Konstantinivka, Pokrovsk and Drushkivka, that, well, in the first two of those, they've made some inroads very close to those towns. In Pokrovsk, I think they're in the outskirts. Drushkivka, they're not near the town, but they're very much within range with drone strikes, short-range drone strikes. So the situation's getting more difficult for the Ukrainians in Donbass, but the Russians are advancing very slowly. And the biggest two towns, Slovyansk and Kramatorsk, are also the best fortified. No one really thinks that the Russians have got a chance of taking them anytime soon. Not this year, probably not next year, even if they keep trying with the same intensity.
Gulliver Cragg, as always, thank you very much indeed. Gulliver Cragg, our Ukraine correspondent. It's time now for Truth